Hello, my dear adventurers. It's Fox. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and theories. Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most unsettling questions that's haunted Stranger Things fans since the very beginning. What if everything we thought we knew about Eleven was wrong? What if the girl we've been rooting for, the hero we've watched grow from a terrified child into a powerful young woman, what if she's actually been the villain all along? Now, before you click away thinking this is just another wild theory with no substance, I want you to settle in and really think about what we've seen over 4 seasons. Because when you start pulling at certain threads, when you really examine the evidence that's been sitting right in front of us this whole time, the picture that emerges is absolutely chilling. So grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore what might be the darkest theory in the entire Stranger Things fandom. Let's start at the very beginning, because that's where the cracks in the hero narrative first appear. The show opens with Will Byers vanishing into thin air on November 6th, 1983, dragged into a nightmarish dimension by a predatory creature. But here's the thing that should make us pause. This happens the exact same night that Eleven escapes from Hawkins' laboratory. The exact same night. Now the show wants us to believe this is just coincidence, that Eleven fled the lab after making contact with the Demogorgon during an experiment, accidentally opening a gate in the process. But when you really think about it, isn't that timing just a bit too perfect? What if it wasn't an accident at all? Consider what we know about Eleven's abilities. She can manipulate matter with her mind, crush objects, flip vehicles through the air, and most importantly, she can open portals to other dimensions. That last ability, that's the key to everything. Because if Eleven has the power to open gates to the Upside Down, she also has the power to control what comes through those gates. The show tells us she accidentally made contact with the Demogorgon and panicked, opening a rift in her fear. But we only have Brenner's word for that, and flashbacks from Eleven's traumatized perspective. What if the truth is far more sinister? Think about what happens immediately after Eleven escapes the lab. Within hours, a child goes missing, pulled into the Upside Down by a creature that conveniently no one in Hawkins had ever encountered before that night. The Demogorgon appears in Hawkins for the first time ever right after Eleven gets out. Now, the official story is that Eleven opened the gate during her panic in the lab, and the Demogorgon just happened to wander through and snatch Will Byers. But what if Eleven sent it? What if that creature was her weapon, unleashed deliberately on Hawkins the moment she escaped? Here's where it gets really interesting. When Eleven encounters the boys in the woods, she's wet, terrified, wearing a hospital gown, and she seems completely vulnerable. It's the perfect way to gain their trust, isn't it? She can't speak properly, she's clearly been abused, and she has these incredible powers that make her seem like a victim who just happens to be extraordinarily gifted. The boys, being good kids, immediately want to help her. Mike especially takes her under his wing, offers her safety, gives her a place to hide. And in doing so, he brings her directly into the search for Will Byers, the very child whose disappearance might have been orchestrated by Eleven herself. Now you might be thinking, why would Eleven want Will to disappear? What possible motive could she have? And that's where we need to talk about manipulation and long-term planning. Because if Eleven is truly a villain, she's not working on impulse. She's been trained by Dr. Brenner since birth, subjected to experiments and psychological conditioning that would break most people. But what if instead of breaking her, that training created something else entirely? What if it created a methodical, calculating mind behind those big, innocent eyes? Let's talk about Dr. Brenner for a moment, because his relationship with Eleven is absolutely crucial to understanding this theory. The show presents Brenner as the villain, the cruel father figure who experiments on children and steals them from their mothers. And yes, Brenner is absolutely a monster. But what if his greatest creation was even more monstrous than he ever imagined? What if in trying to create a weapon, he accidentally created something with its own agenda? Brenner raised Eleven in complete isolation, teaching her that her powers made her special, that she was meant for greatness, that ordinary people couldn't possibly understand what she was capable of. He pushed her to her absolute limits, forcing her to kill, to destroy, to use her abilities in increasingly disturbing ways. There's that horrific moment, revealed in Season 4, where Brenner presents young Eleven with a cat and demands that she hurt it. When she refuses, she's punished severely. And then, in her rage and fear, she kills 2 guards, snapping one's neck with her powers, while Brenner watches with satisfaction. Now the show frames this as evidence of Brenner's cruelty, proof that Eleven is a victim of his abuse, and she absolutely is a victim of abuse. But trauma doesn't always create heroes. Sometimes it creates villains. Sometimes it creates people who learn that power is the only thing that matters, that violence is the solution to problems, that ordinary human connections are weaknesses to be exploited. What if that's what happened to Eleven? Think about how she behaves throughout Season 1. Yes, she helps the boys search for Will. Yes, she seems genuinely attached to them, especially Mike. But let's look at her actions more critically. She's constantly holding back information. She knows things about the Upside Down, about the Demogorgon, about the lab's activities, but she parcels out details only when absolutely necessary. She manipulates the boys emotionally, using their desperation to find Will to keep them close to her. And most tellingly, she's always in control, even when she appears vulnerable. Take the scene where she flips the government van through the air to save the boys. It's portrayed as this triumphant moment, proof that Eleven is on their side, willing to use her powers to protect them. But think about what that scene actually demonstrates. It shows that Eleven can unleash devastating force at will, that she's perfectly capable of killing groups of armed adults without breaking a sweat, and that she's been holding back the entire time she's been with the boys. She's been showing them just enough of her power to seem useful, to seem necessary, but not so much that they'd realize just how dangerous she truly is. And here's something that really bothered me when I went back and rewatched Season 1 with this theory in mind. Eleven always knows where Will is in the Upside Down. Always. She can locate him through the void, guide them to where he's being held, tell them when he's in danger. But here's the question that nobody asks. If Eleven can track Will so easily, why can't she just bring him back? She has the power to open gates to the Upside Down. She proves that multiple times throughout the series. So why, in Season 1, does she never suggest just opening a portal and pulling Will through? The show handwaves this by making it seem like her powers aren't strong enough yet, like she's still learning what she's capable of. But we know from later seasons that even young Eleven was extraordinarily powerful. She opened the original gate. She sent Henry Creel to the Upside Down years earlier. So why couldn't she open a small, controlled portal to rescue Will? Unless, of course, she didn't want Will rescued. Not yet. Not until the situation had developed in a way that served her purposes. Because here's what actually happens in Season 1. Eleven inserts herself into a group of kids who had no connection to Hawkins' lab, no understanding of the supernatural forces at work in their town. She gains their complete trust and loyalty. She positions herself as their only hope of saving Will, making herself indispensable. And in the process, she learns everything about them, their families, their connections to the town, their resources. She's gathering intelligence the entire time, preparing for something bigger. And then, at the end of Season 1, she sacrifices herself to destroy the Demogorgon. It's supposed to be this big, emotional moment where Eleven gives up everything to save her friends. But look at what actually happens in that scene. The Demogorgon has cornered everyone in the school. Things look hopeless. And then Eleven, in this massive display of power, disintegrates the creature completely. Both she and the Demogorgon vanish, pulled into the Upside Down in the process. Except, here's the thing. We know from Season 2 that Eleven survived that encounter just fine. She wasn't dead, wasn't even significantly injured. She just ended up in the Upside Down temporarily before escaping back to Hawkins. So what was the point of that big sacrifice moment? Why make it seem like she was giving up her life when she had to have known, on some level, that she'd survive? Unless the goal was never really to die, but to make everyone believe she had died, to cement her status as a tragic hero in everyone's minds. Think about the impact of that moment. Mike is devastated, convinced he's lost Eleven forever. The boys spend months grieving her. Joyce and Hopper are traumatized by yet another loss. The entire town of Hawkins thinks the nightmare is over, that the monster is dead, and the girl who saved them is gone. It's the perfect setup for Eleven to operate in the shadows, to plan her next move without anyone watching her closely. And what does Eleven do during that year between Seasons 1 and 2? She hides in Hopper's cabin, supposedly recovering and learning to control her powers. But Hopper keeps her isolated, doesn't let her go to school, barely lets her leave the cabin. Now, the show presents this as Hopper being overprotective, worried that the lab is still looking for her. But what if Hopper keeps her isolated because he's genuinely afraid of her? What if he's seen something during that year that makes him realize Eleven might be dangerous in ways that go beyond just her telekinetic abilities? There's this tension between Hopper and Eleven throughout Season 2 that's never fully explained. Hopper is paranoid about her leaving the cabin, angry when she disobeys his rules, constantly trying to control her movements. The show frames this as a difficult father-daughter relationship, growing pains as they learn to live together. But what if it's something darker? What if Hopper is trying to contain a threat he doesn't fully understand? Because here's what happens in Season 2. The gate that Eleven supposedly accidentally opened in Season 1, it's still there. It's growing. and strange things start happening in Hawkins again. The Upside Down is spreading, infecting the town like a disease, sending tendrils through the soil, corrupting crops, creating a network of tunnels beneath the surface. Will, who was trapped in the Upside Down for a week, starts having visions. He becomes connected to this vast, malevolent intelligence that people call the Mind Flayer. Now, the official explanation is that the Mind Flayer is an ancient entity that lives in the Upside Down, a sort of hive mind that controls all the creatures there. It's presented as the true villain of Stranger Things, the puppet master behind all the horror. But here's a question that should make us very uncomfortable. What if the Mind Flayer doesn't exist at all? What if it's just another mask that Eleven wears? Think about it. We never see the Mind Flayer do anything that Eleven couldn't do with her powers. It's telepathic, able to invade people's minds and possess them. 11 is telepathic. It can open and close gates to the Upside Down. So can 11. It seems to have a vast, spreading presence throughout the dimension. 11 can project her consciousness across great distances. Every single thing attributed to the Mind Flayer could easily be accomplished by a powerful psychic like 11, especially one who's been training and growing stronger for years. And here's something really creepy. The Mind Flayer only becomes active after 11 opens that first gate. Before November 1983, there's no evidence of it terrorizing Hawkins, no suggestion that it even existed. The Upside Down might have been there all along, but the Mind Flayer, that appears to be new. It appears to be directly connected to 11's involvement with the dimension. Season 2 shows us Will being possessed by this entity, used as a spy to infiltrate Hawkins and learn about the people trying to close the gate. But every time Will is possessed, every time he's connected to the Mind Flayer, where is 11? She's conveniently absent, hidden away in Hopper's cabin, supposedly unable to help because Hopper won't let her leave. But what if she's not absent at all? What if she's the one puppeteering the entire thing, using Will as a vessel to gather information, to understand how the town works, to identify threats and weaknesses? Will describes his connection to the Mind Flayer in very specific terms. He says it's not just in our world, it's everywhere. He says it wants to kill everyone except him, wants to take over everything. But here's the disturbing part. That description could just as easily apply to 11. She's connected to the Upside Down through the gates she's created. She's demonstrated the ability to be everywhere through her remote viewing powers. And if she is a villain, her ultimate goal would presumably be to eliminate threats and establish control. The Mind Flayer's agenda and a hypothetical villain 11's agenda are identical. At the end of Season 2, 11 closes the gate, apparently banishing the Mind Flayer back to the Upside Down and saving Hawkins once again. She's the hero, the savior, the only person powerful enough to fix what's broken. But let's think about what's actually happening in that scene. 11 walks into Hawkins' lab, past all the soldiers and scientists, approaches this massive glowing rift between dimensions, and then just closes it with what looks like moderate effort. She's never done anything like this before, never demonstrated the ability to seal dimensional rifts, but she does it successfully on her first try. That should raise some serious questions. If closing gates is that straightforward for 11, Why didn't she close the original gate as soon as she realized it was causing problems? Why let it grow and spread for an entire year? Why let Will suffer? Let the Upside Down infect Hawkins? Let people die before finally stepping in to fix it? The only logical answer is that she wanted all of that to happen. She wanted the gate to remain open, wanted the Mind Flayer, or whatever she was doing while pretending to be the Mind Flayer, to gather information and establish a foothold in Hawkins. And then, once she had what she needed, once she'd positioned herself perfectly as the indispensable hero, she closed the gate with a grand gesture that ensured everyone in Hawkins knew exactly who had saved them. It's brilliant manipulation when you think about it. Create a problem, let it escalate, then solve it publicly to cement your status as a hero. It's a classic tactic used by villains throughout history, and Eleven pulls it off flawlessly. Season 3 is where things start to get really interesting, because this is where cracks in Eleven's hero facade really begin to show. The season starts with her in a relationship with Mike, living in the Byers' house, seemingly adjusting to normal teenage life. But pay attention to how she behaves in her relationship. She's possessive of Mike, jealous when he pays attention to anyone else, quick to anger when things don't go her way. Now, some of that is normal teenage behavior, sure, but combine it with her powers, and it becomes something more sinister. There's a scene where Eleven uses her powers to spy on Mike through the void because she's upset that he hasn't called her. She's literally using psychic surveillance on her boyfriend to monitor his behavior. That's not cute or quirky. That's terrifying. That's using superhuman abilities to control and manipulate someone you're supposed to care about. And the show plays it for laughs, as if it's just a funny teenage moment, but think about the implications. If Eleven is willing to violate Mike's privacy so casually, what else is she willing to do with her powers when no one's watching? Then there's her friendship with Max, which on the surface seems sweet and positive. Max teaches Eleven about independence, about standing up for herself, about having fun without needing Mike's permission for everything. But look at what Eleven actually learns from Max: how to lie more effectively, how to manipulate Mike emotionally, how to weaponize typical teenage relationship drama to get what she wants. Max might have good intentions, but she's essentially teaching Eleven more sophisticated methods of controlling the people around her. And then the Mind Flayer returns, or at least something that calls itself the Mind Flayer returns. Because here's another question nobody really asks: how did it come back? Eleven closed the gate at the end of Season 2. The show tells us the Russians opened a new gate under Starcourt Mall, allowing the Mind Flayer to return to Hawkins. But the timeline doesn't quite work. The Mind Flayer's presence is felt in Hawkins before the Russians successfully open their gate. Billy is possessed before the Starcourt gate fully opens. It's as if the Mind Flayer never really left, as if closing that gate didn't actually banish it at all. Unless, of course, the Mind Flayer isn't a separate entity that needs gates to access Hawkins. Unless it's actually Eleven, who never left Hawkins, who's been there all along, who can manipulate the Upside Down and its creatures without needing physical portals because she's connected to that dimension on a fundamental level. Billy's possession is particularly revealing when you examine it closely. He's driving one night, his car breaks down, and something from the upside down grabs him, drags him to some industrial building, and implants him with a piece of the Mind Flayer. The show presents this as the Mind Flayer, choosing Billy as its host. But why Billy? What makes him special? The show suggests it's because he's angry, troubled, full of rage that the Mind Flayer can exploit. But you know who else fits that description? Eleven herself. Eleven has plenty of rage. She's angry at Brenner for what he did to her, angry at the world for her isolation, angry at anyone who threatens the small group of people she's decided to protect. And she knows Billy, has seen him through Max's stories, understands that he's volatile and troubled. If Eleven wanted to create chaos in Hawkins, if she wanted to test her powers and her influence, possessing Billy would be a strategic choice. He's strong. He has access to the community pool where he can find more hosts, and his death wouldn't be particularly mourned by most of Hawkins. The way the Mind Flayer operates in Season 3 is also suspiciously similar to how Eleven uses her powers. It consumes people, breaks them down, absorbs them into a larger mass. Eleven has biokinesis, the ability to manipulate biological matter. We've seen her shatter minds, kill with a thought, even stop someone's heart and then restart it. Creating a flesh monster out of liquefied humans is well within her demonstrated abilities, especially if she's been growing stronger over the years. And here's something that really bothered me when I watched Season 3 with this theory in mind. Throughout the entire season, Eleven is conveniently weakened. First, her leg is injured by the Mind Flayer, with a piece of it embedded in her flesh. Then, after that's removed, her powers just stop working. They completely disappear at the exact moment when everyone needs them most. The show explains this as a result of the injury, that physical trauma somehow severed her connection to her abilities. But that explanation never quite made sense, did it? Eleven has been injured before, and her powers remained intact. She's pushed herself to the point of collapse, bled from her eyes and nose, nearly died, and her abilities always came back. So why did they disappear in Season 3? Unless she wanted them to disappear. Unless losing her powers at that particular moment served her purposes. Think about what happens when Eleven is powerless. Suddenly, everyone has to work together to solve the problem without relying on her. Suddenly, people die because Eleven isn't there to save them. Hopper sacrifices himself, or appears to, because Eleven can't get to him in time. The Mind Flayer is defeated, not by Eleven, but by a combination of Joyce, Hopper, Murray, and the kids working together. And what's the result? Eleven, now powerless and orphaned again with Hopper gone, moves away from Hawkins with the Byers family. She gets to leave town, gets to reset her position, gets to reinvent herself somewhere new where no one knows her history or questions her too closely. It's another perfect setup, isn't it? The hero, stripped of her powers, forced to leave her home, setting out on a new chapter. It tugs at the heartstrings, makes everyone sympathetic to her. But what if losing her powers was strategic? What if Eleven realized she'd become too visible, too central to Hawkins' defense against the Upside Down, and decided she needed to step back, regroup, and approach things differently, taking away her own powers, allowing Hopper to seemingly die, moving to California? All of it could be part of a larger plan we're not seeing yet. Season 4 is where this theory gets really, really dark, because Season 4 is where we learn the truth about the Hawkins Lab massacre, about Eleven's past, about Henry Creel, and how he became Vecna. And the show presents all of this as revelations that make Eleven even more sympathetic, even more of a victim and a hero. But when you look at the actual events, when you really examine what happened, the picture is far more disturbing than the show wants us to believe. Let's talk about the massacre at Hawkins Lab on September 8th, 1979. For seasons, we've been led to believe that Eleven killed everyone at the lab in some kind of explosive reaction to trauma or abuse. Season 4, Episode 1 opens with that massacre, showing us the aftermath, bodies everywhere, blood covering the floors, and young Eleven standing in the middle of it all, blood on her hands, looking shell-shocked. The natural assumption is that Eleven snapped under the pressure of Brenner's experiments and lashed out, killing everyone in a moment of uncontrolled rage. But as the season progresses, we learn that's not what happened. We learn that an orderly at the lab, a man who befriended Eleven and seemed to be helping her, was actually Henry Creel, the lab's very first test subject, who'd been trapped there for years, with his powers suppressed by a device in his neck. Henry manipulated Eleven into removing that suppressor, and the moment his powers were restored, he went on a rampage, killing nearly every child and staff member in the facility. Eleven fought back, using her powers to banish Henry to another dimension, which happened to be the Upside Down. And there, Henry became Vecna, the monstrous villain of Season 4. Now, the show tells us this story to explain Eleven's trauma, to show us why she repressed these memories, to make us understand that she's not just a hero, but a survivor of incredible horror. But let's really think about what this story means. Let's examine the details that don't quite add up. First, Eleven removes the suppressor from Henry's neck because he convinces her to, tells her he's helping her escape, makes her believe he's on her side. But Eleven is psychic. She can read minds, sense emotions, project her consciousness into other people's heads. She's done all of these things throughout the series. So how did she not know what Henry really was? How did she not sense his murderous intentions? How did this girl, who's been trained since birth to detect threats and defend herself, get so completely fooled by Henry Creel? Unless she wasn't fooled at all. Unless she knew exactly what Henry was and exactly what he would do if she freed him. Think about what Eleven gains from that massacre. All of her fellow test subjects, the only other people who shared her abilities, who could potentially rival her power, are eliminated. Brenner's program is destroyed. The lab's operations are severely disrupted, and Eleven herself is positioned as the sole survivor, the only child who managed to stand up to Henry Creel and banish him to another dimension. It's a convenient outcome for someone who wanted to be unique, irreplaceable, the most powerful psychic in existence. And here's something really disturbing. The show tells us that Eleven banished Henry to the Upside Down, that she essentially created Vecna by sending him to that dimension where he merged with its darkness and gained even greater powers. But what if that wasn't an accident? What if Eleven sent Henry there deliberately, knowing what it would do to him, knowing that he would become something monstrous? Because think about what Vecna is. He's an alternate version of what Eleven could be, a psychic who embraced darkness completely, who sees humanity as weak and worthy of destruction, who uses his powers without restraint or mercy. He's everything Eleven could become if she let go of the last threads of her humanity. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Vecna is meant to exist as a contrast, as the ultimate villain that makes Eleven look heroic by comparison. Throughout Season 4, Eleven is living in California, supposedly powerless, trying to live a normal life and failing miserably. She's bullied at school, humiliated by her classmates, struggling to fit in without her powers to protect her. It's heartbreaking to watch, but it's also strategic, because during this time, back in Hawkins, a new serial killer emerges. Vecna begins targeting teenagers, pulling them into terrifying visions before brutally murdering them in a way that opens gates to the Upside Down. Now, we're told that Vecna is acting independently, that he's been planning this for years, that he wants to merge the dimensions and destroy humanity. But here's what bothers me. Vecna targets very specific people, not random victims, but teenagers with trauma, with guilt, with deep psychological wounds. He chooses Chrissy Cunningham, who's suffering from an eating disorder and an abusive mother. He chooses Fred Benson, who's consumed by guilt over a car accident. He chooses Patrick McKinney, who's being abused by his father. And he chooses Max Mayfield, who's drowning in grief and guilt over her stepbrother's death. These aren't random selections. These are carefully chosen victims, picked based on intimate knowledge of their psychological states. And you know who has that kind of knowledge? Eleven. She can enter people's minds, read their thoughts, see their traumas. She's done it before, multiple times throughout the series. So how does Vecna, trapped in the Upside Down, know exactly which teenagers in Hawkins are vulnerable? How does he know about Chrissy's relationship with her mother, or Fred's accident, or Max's guilt? Unless Vecna is receiving information from someone in Hawkins. Unless Vecna is being guided by someone who can psychically survey the town, identify vulnerable targets, and direct a monster to feed on them. The connection between Eleven and Vecna is emphasized repeatedly throughout Season 4. They're mirrors of each other, two sides of the same coin. They have the same powers, the same training, the same potential for destruction. The show presents this as Eleven being the one person who can stop Vecna because she's his equal. But what if they're not enemies at all? What if they're working together? Think about the logistics. Eleven supposedly loses her powers at the end of Season 3, but in Season 4, she regains them through Dr. Brenner's Nina Project, a program designed to help her relive her suppressed memories and unlock her abilities again. But here's the question. If Eleven truly lost her powers through physical injury, how does remembering traumatic events restore them? Powers aren't memories. They're not based on psychological states. They're biological abilities, part of her neurological structure. Remembering the massacre shouldn't restore her telekinesis any more than remembering how to ride a bike would heal a broken leg, unless her powers weren't really gone, unless she was suppressing them deliberately, waiting for the right moment to reveal that she still had them. And the Nina Project gave her the perfect excuse to regain abilities she'd never actually lost. Dr. Brenner's involvement in Season 4 is also suspicious. He survived the Demogorgon attack at the end of Season 1, has been working in secret for years and suddenly reappears to help Eleven restore her powers. But why would Brenner, who Eleven supposedly hates, who represents everything evil about her childhood, why would he suddenly become an ally? Why would Eleven work with him, trust him enough to undergo his experiments again? The show frames it as Eleven being desperate, willing to do anything to save her friends, even if it means confronting her abuser. But what if the truth is simpler? What if Brenner and Eleven have been working together all along? What if Brenner isn't really a villain, but a handler, managing his greatest creation, helping her execute whatever plan she's been building toward for years? There's a scene in season 4 where Eleven confronts Brenner about Henry Creel, about what happened at the lab, about how Brenner tried to control all of them. And Brenner's defense is chilling. He says that he gave them gifts, that he helped them unlock their potential, that everything he did was to make them stronger. And you know what? He's not wrong. Whatever else Brenner is, he did successfully create multiple psychics with incredible powers. He took children and turned them into weapons. And his most successful creation, his masterpiece, is Eleven. What if Eleven has internalized Brenner's lessons completely? What if she believes, deep down, that power is the only thing that matters? That ordinary humans are weak and need to be controlled or eliminated, that she's special and destined for greatness? Those beliefs would make her incredibly dangerous. They'd make her a perfect villain, one who genuinely believes she's doing the right thing, even as she manipulates and destroys everyone around her. The final battle of season 4 is particularly revealing. Eleven, with her powers restored, psychically projects herself into Max's mind while Vecna is attacking her. She fights Vecna in this mental space, while her friends and Hawkins physically attack his body in the Upside Down. It's an epic confrontation, showing Eleven and Vecna locked in battle across dimensions. But look at what actually happens in that fight. Eleven is losing badly. Vecna is stronger than her, more experienced, more willing to embrace darkness. He's breaking her down, overwhelming her defenses, and it looks like he's going to win. And then Mike tells Eleven he loves her, gives her this emotional speech about how she's a hero, how she's always been a hero, how he's loved her since the moment they met. And suddenly, Eleven gets a surge of power, rallies, and pushes back against Vecna. It's supposed to be this beautiful moment, love conquering evil, the power of human connection defeating darkness. But think about what it actually demonstrates. It shows that Eleven's power is directly connected to her emotional state, that she can draw strength from positive emotions and become stronger based on what people say to her. That's not how telekinesis works. That's not how any psychic ability works. Powers are biological, neurological, based on brain structure and training, not on feelings. Unless Eleven's powers are fundamentally different from how the show portrays them. Unless her abilities aren't just telekinesis and telepathy, but something more like reality manipulation. The power to shape the world based on her will, to make things real through sheer force of belief. That would explain a lot of inconsistencies throughout the series. Why her powers fluctuate so wildly, why emotional states affect her abilities so dramatically, why she can do things that should be physically impossible, like opening stable portals to other dimensions. And if Eleven has that kind of power, the ability to reshape reality through will alone, then she's not just a psychic. She's something far more dangerous. She's essentially a god, limited only by her imagination and her willpower. And gods, as we know from mythology, often make terrible villains. At the end of Season 4, despite everyone's best efforts, Vecna succeeds in opening 4 gates to the Upside Down. These gates converge in the middle of Hawkins, creating a massive rift that begins to merge the dimensions. The Upside Down starts bleeding into the real world, corrupting Hawkins, covering it in darkness and decay. People are evacuated, the town is falling apart, and it seems like the apocalypse has arrived. And where is Eleven during all of this? She arrives back in Hawkins after everything has already happened, reunites with her friends, sees the destruction, and looks appropriately horrified. But here's the thing, she failed to stop Vecna. After 4 seasons of being positioned as the only person who can save Hawkins, the only one powerful enough to close gates and defeat monsters, she failed. Max died, even if only temporarily. The gates opened, the Upside Down invaded. Everything Eleven was supposedly trying to prevent happened anyway. That's a pretty convenient failure, isn't it? Because now Hawkins is exactly where Eleven might want it, on the brink of destruction, with the Upside Down merged with reality, with the entire town dependent on her to fix things. She's positioned perfectly to be the savior once again, to step in and save everyone in Season 5. Or if she's truly a villain, she's positioned perfectly to finally reveal her true nature and take control of both dimensions. Think about what Eleven has accomplished over 4 seasons. She's inserted herself into the lives of Hawkins' residents, made herself indispensable, positioned herself as the only defense against supernatural threats. She's eliminated potential rivals, whether it was her fellow lab children or anyone else who might challenge her power. She's opened gates to the Upside Down and then closed them again, demonstrating her control over dimensional barriers. She's survived attacks from monsters, government forces, and other psychics. She's befriended the children of Hawkins' police chief and other influential figures, gaining access to resources and protection. And through it all, she's maintained her image as a hero, as a victim, as someone who just wants to be normal but keeps getting pulled into battles she never asked for. It's brilliant manipulation when you think about it. Create problems, position yourself as the solution, and ensure that everyone trusts you completely. Depends on you, absolutely. Would never question your motives because you're just a poor, traumatized girl trying to do the right thing. Let's talk about Eleven's relationships, because they're key to understanding her potential villainy. She's closest to Mike Wheeler, who's been devoted to her since the moment they met. Mike would do anything for Eleven, defend her against any accusation, trust her absolutely. That kind of blind loyalty is useful for a villain. It means Mike will never question her, never wonder if she's capable of darkness, never see warning signs because he's too busy seeing her as perfect. Then there's Hopper, her adoptive father, who died, or appeared to die, protecting her. Hopper was the one person who might have been able to control Eleven, who had the authority and the will to keep her contained if necessary. His death in Season 3 removes a potential obstacle to Eleven's plans. And yes, he comes back in Season 4, but he's traumatized, weakened, changed by his time in Russian prison. He's not the same man who could stand up to Eleven anymore. Joyce Byers becomes Eleven's guardian after Hopper's disappearance. Joyce is kind, nurturing, but she's not equipped to handle a potentially dangerous psychic. She wants to help Eleven, to give her a normal life, but she doesn't have the skills or knowledge to recognize if Eleven is manipulating her. It's the perfect setup for a villain, a parental figure who provides cover and legitimacy, but who can't actually stop her from doing whatever she wants. Max is particularly interesting in this context because of what happens to her in Season 4. Vecna targets Max specifically, exploits her grief and guilt over Billy's death, and nearly kills her. Eleven saves Max's life, pulling her back from death itself and keeping her consciousness alive, even though her body is shattered and comatose. It's portrayed as this incredible act of love and heroism, proof that Eleven will do anything to save her friends. But think about what that actually means. Eleven has the power to keep someone's consciousness alive, even when their body is clinically dead. That's an absolutely terrifying ability. It means Eleven could theoretically trap someone in their own mind, keep them alive but helpless, maintain them in a state between life and death indefinitely. And that's exactly what she does to Max. Now we're told she's doing this to give Max a chance to wake up, to heal, to come back from her injuries. But Max has been in that state for months by the time Season 5 begins. She's not waking up, she's not healing, she's just existing, suspended in this twilight state because Eleven won't let her go. Is that mercy, or is that something else? Is Eleven keeping Max alive for Max's sake, or is she keeping Max trapped because it serves her purposes? And here's a really dark thought. What if Eleven is the one who put Max in danger in the first place? What if the whole confrontation with Vecna, Max's near death, all of it was staged to demonstrate Eleven's power, to show everyone what she's capable of, to make sure they understand that she's the only thing standing between them and total destruction? There's this pattern throughout Stranger Things where terrible things happen and Eleven is always just barely able to stop them. The gate opens and she closes it. The Mind Flayer attacks and she defeats it. Vecna nearly wins and she holds him back. It's always a close call, always desperate, always coming down to the last possible moment. That's great drama, but it's also suspicious. Because if Eleven is as powerful as we've been told, if she can flip vans and crush brains and open dimensional portals, why is every battle such a struggle? Why does she always seem to be just barely strong enough? Unless she's holding back. Unless she's carefully calibrating her responses to make sure the threats seem overwhelming, to make sure her interventions seem heroic rather than easy, to maintain the illusion that she's barely able to keep up with the forces arrayed against Hawkins. A villain who's too obviously powerful would be exposed immediately. But a villain who seems vulnerable, who seems to be struggling, who makes everyone think they're watching a hero fight against impossible odds, that villain could operate undetected for years. Let's consider Eleven's evolution over the series. In Season 1, she's frightened, nearly mute, dependent on the boys for basic care. By Season 4, she's confident, articulate, capable of complex planning and deception. That's a natural growth trajectory for any character, but it's also exactly how a villain would develop. Start weak and sympathetic, gradually reveal more capabilities, slowly shift the balance of power until you're in complete control. And 11 is in control. She might not seem like it, might appear to be reacting to events rather than creating them, but look at the actual results. Every season ends with 11 more powerful than before, more central to Hawkins's defense, more trusted by everyone around her. Any potential rivals are eliminated. Any authorities who might control her are removed or weakened. The Upside Down, which could be seen as either a threat or a resource depending on who's controlling it, becomes more and more accessible and integrated with the real world. By the end of Season 4, 11 has effectively achieved what any villain would want: a situation where she's indispensable, where her word is law because she's the only one who can fight the monsters, where questioning her would seem insane because she's obviously the hero. She has access to 2 dimensions, has demonstrated the ability to resurrect the dead or keep them suspended between states, has eliminated or subordinated everyone who might challenge her authority. It's a perfect position for a villain who's playing a very long game. Now let's talk about the Upside Down itself, because understanding that dimension is crucial to understanding this theory. The show presents the Upside Down as a naturally occurring alternate dimension, a dark mirror of our world that existed long before 11 made contact with it. But we learned in Season 4 that the Upside Down is frozen in time on November 6th, 1983, the day Will disappeared, the day 11 opened the first gate. That's not a natural phenomenon. That's not how dimensions work, at least not according to any scientific theory. If the Upside Down is a parallel dimension, it should have its own timeline, its own progression of events. But instead, it's locked to one specific moment in Hawkins' history, the moment 11 got involved. What if the Upside Down isn't a parallel dimension at all? What if it's something 11 created, whether deliberately or accidentally? What if her psychic powers are so vast that she literally imagined a new dimension into existence, populated it with monsters from her nightmares, and then convinced everyone that it had always been there? That would explain so many inconsistencies. It would explain why the Upside Down mirrors Hawkins so exactly. It would explain why it's frozen at the moment of 11's involvement. It would explain why all the creatures from there seem designed to terrorize humans in very specific ways, as if they were created by someone who understands human fears intimately. It would explain why the Mind Flayer, supposedly an ancient alien intelligence, behaves remarkably like a human psychic with godlike powers. If 11 created the Upside Down, then everything that's happened in Stranger Things is her fault. Not accidentally, not as an unintended consequence, but as a direct result of her will, her power, her choices. The Demogorgon that took Will, 11's creation. The Mind Flayer that possessed people, 11's creation. Vecna? Well, Vecna is Henry Creel, but 11 sent him to the Upside Down, knowing what he would become, effectively creating the monster he turned into. This theory makes 11 not just a villain, but the villain, the source of all evil in Stranger Things, the puppet master behind every monster and every tragedy. It's a deeply disturbing interpretation, but when you look at the evidence, when you really examine the patterns and inconsistencies, it's hard to dismiss. Let's talk about 11's powers more specifically, because understanding what she can do helps us understand what she might be capable of. We know she has telekinesis, the ability to move objects with her mind. We know she has telepathy, the ability to read thoughts and project her consciousness. We know she can manipulate biological systems, as demonstrated when she stopped and restarted Max's heart. We know she can open portals to other dimensions, and we know her powers grow stronger over time, especially when she's emotional or motivated by protecting people she cares about. But there are hints throughout the series that Eleven's abilities go far beyond what we've seen. In Season 2, her spiritual sister Kaylee tells her that she can do anything if she uses her anger, that her emotions unlock greater power. And we see that demonstrated multiple times. 11 becomes exponentially more powerful when she's angry or afraid or protecting someone she loves. But there's something else that happens when 11 uses her powers extensively. Reality itself seems to bend around her. Lights flicker, electronics malfunction, the fabric of space seems to warp. It's subtle, but it's there. And it suggests that 11's powers aren't just affecting objects or minds, but affecting reality itself at a fundamental level. What if 11 isn't just a psychic? What if she's a reality warper, someone who can reshape the world according to her will? That would explain how she can do impossible things, like create stable portals to other dimensions. It would explain why her powers don't follow consistent rules. It would explain why she seems to be able to do whatever the plot requires her to do in any given moment. And most importantly, it would make her unstoppable. A reality warper doesn't need to fight enemies, or close gates, or battle monsters. A reality warper simply wills those things to happen or not happen, and reality conforms to their desires. The only limit would be their imagination and their willpower, and 11 has both in abundance. If this is true, if 11 really is a reality warper, then she could have created the Upside Down, could have populated it with monsters, could have designed every challenge and threat that Hawkins has faced. She could be the author of this entire nightmare, writing a story where she gets to be the hero, where everyone depends on her, where she's special and powerful and necessary. That's the ultimate form of control, isn't it? Not just controlling people's actions, but controlling reality itself to ensure that you're always in the position you want to be in. And from that perspective, everything that's happened in Stranger Things makes perfect sense. It's not a story about a town being terrorized by supernatural forces. It's a story about one incredibly powerful, incredibly damaged girl who's reshaping the world to suit her needs. Think about Eleven's journey from this perspective. She starts as a prisoner in Hawkins' lab, powerless despite her abilities because she's controlled by Brenner and his experiments. But then she escapes, or thinks she escapes, and discovers that the outside world isn't what she hoped. People are cruel, life is hard, and even with her powers, she's still alone and afraid. So what does she do? She creates a crisis. She opens a gate to a nightmarish dimension, releases monsters that threaten the town, makes herself necessary. And in doing so, she finds what she was really looking for, a family. Mike and the boys adopt her. Joyce takes her in. Hopper becomes her father. She's no longer alone. She has people who care about her, who will protect her, who will never abandon her. But maintaining that family requires maintaining the crisis. If the threats go away, if Hawkins becomes safe, then 11 is just a traumatized girl with strange abilities. She's not special anymore. She's not necessary. People might start to question her, might start to wonder if she's dangerous, might start to think that maybe she should be controlled or monitored or sent away. So the threats never really go away. They just evolve. Each season brings a new crisis, a new monster, a new reason for everyone to rally around Eleven and depend on her completely. And with each crisis, Eleven becomes more powerful, more central, more in control of the narrative. By season 4, she's achieved a total psychological control over her inner circle. Mike worships her, Joyce trusts her, Hopper sees her as his daughter. The other kids view her as their secret weapon. No one questions her anymore. No one wonders if maybe she's dangerous. They're all too busy being grateful that she's on their side. Except, what if she's not on their side? What if she's on her own side, using them all as props in her elaborate play, keeping them close because they serve her purposes, but ultimately viewing them as resources rather than real people? That would make her a true villain, as someone who manipulates emotions and relationships without actually feeling genuine connections herself. There's evidence for this in how Eleven treats people who are no longer useful to her. Dr. Brenner is the clearest example. Throughout season 4, Brenner tries to help Eleven, works to restore her powers, protects her from military forces that want to kill her. And when he's dying, when he's begging her to understand that he only wanted to help her, she just says, "Goodbye, Papa," and walks away. No forgiveness, no gratitude, no real emotion at all. Just cold dismissal of someone who's outlived his usefulness. Now, Brenner absolutely deserved that treatment. He was a monster who tortured children. But the coldness of Eleven's response, the complete lack of any emotional complexity, that's chilling. It suggests that Eleven is capable of turning off her feelings when convenient, of treating people as means to ends rather than as individuals deserving of compassion. And if she can do that to Brenner, who raised her, who gave her her powers, who she once called Papa, what might she be capable of doing to others? To Mike, if he ever stopped being useful? To Joyce, if she ever became an obstacle? To any of her friends, if they ever threatened to expose what she really is? The evidence is circumstantial, I'll admit that. There's no smoking gun, no moment where Eleven twirls a mustache and reveals her evil plan. But that's exactly what makes this theory so compelling and so disturbing, because the best villains, the truly dangerous ones, are the ones who never seem like villains at all. They're the ones who manipulate from the shadows, who shape events so skillfully that everyone thinks they're watching a hero's journey when they're actually watching a villain's rise to power. And Eleven has done exactly that. She's shaped Stranger Things from the very beginning, from the moment she escaped the lab and walked into Mike Wheeler's basement. Every major event can be traced back to her in some way. Every monster can be connected to the gates she opened. Every crisis serves to make her more necessary, more powerful, more central to everyone's survival. Is she doing this consciously? Does she wake up every morning and think about how to manipulate her friends today? Probably not. That's not how this kind of villainy works. More likely, Eleven genuinely believes she's a hero. She believes she's protecting Hawkins, believes she's doing the right thing. But her definition of the right thing is warped by years of abuse and manipulation by Brenner, by her desperate need to belong, by her terror of being alone again. So she does what makes sense to her. She creates situations where she's necessary, where people need her, where she can never be abandoned or rejected because she's too important. And if that requires occasionally unleashing monsters on Hawkins, well, she can always stop them later. If it requires people dying, well, she can keep their consciousness alive, like she did with Max. If it requires reshaping reality itself, well, she's powerful enough to do that too. The scariest villains are the ones who don't think they're villains, the ones who genuinely believe their actions are justified, that the ends justify the means, that they're making hard choices for the greater good. And 11, with her history of trauma, her immense power, and her desperate need for connection, fits that description perfectly. Season 5 is coming, and we're promised answers. The Duffer Brothers have said it will explain everything, will bring all the threads together, will give us a definitive ending to the story. And I can't help but wonder, will they reveal that 11 has been the villain all along? Will they pull back the curtain and show us that everything we thought we knew was wrong? Or will they keep the illusion going? Will they give us a triumphant ending where 11 defeats Vecna and closes the gates and saves Hawkins one final time? Because that would be the perfect conclusion to this theory. The villain succeeds completely, shapes reality into exactly what she wants, and everyone thinks she's a hero. No one ever knows the truth. No one ever questions the narrative. And 11 gets to live happily ever after, surrounded by people who love her and depend on her, never knowing that she's the source of all their suffering. That's genuinely terrifying when you think about it. The idea that we might watch all of Season 5, see 11 make sacrifices and fight battles and save the day, and never realize that she's been orchestrating the entire thing from the beginning. That we might cheer for her victory, cry at her struggles, celebrate her happy ending, all while she's actually the worst villain in the entire show. I want to be clear. I don't know if this theory is true. The Duffer Brothers have given us a complex, nuanced character in 11, and there are plenty of ways to interpret her actions that don't involve her being evil. She could genuinely be a hero, a traumatized girl doing her best with impossible circumstances, making mistakes, but ultimately trying to do the right thing. That's a valid interpretation too, but the evidence for the darker interpretation is there if you look for it. The coincidences, the patterns, the way she's always at the center of every crisis, the way her power seems to bend reality itself, the coldness she sometimes shows, the manipulation that's woven through all her relationships. It's all there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots. And that's what makes Stranger Things such brilliant television. Because whether 11 is a hero or a villain, whether she's saving Hawkins or destroying it, she's an absolutely fascinating character. She's complex, damaged, powerful, and utterly unique. And the show has kept us guessing about her true nature for 4 seasons, feeding us just enough hints of darkness to make us wonder, but never quite confirming or denying the theory. Maybe Season 5 will give us answers. Maybe we'll finally learn the truth about 11, about the Upside Down, about everything that's really been happening in Hawkins. Or maybe the ambiguity is the point. Maybe we're supposed to never quite know, to be left with questions and theories and debates that will last long after the show ends. What I do know is this: if 11 really is the villain, if this theory is correct, then Stranger Things is an even darker, more complex, more sophisticated show than I ever gave it credit for, because it would mean the Duffer Brothers have been playing the longest con in television history, building a villain who's so perfect, so sympathetic, so heroic on the surface that we never thought to question whether she might be the real monster. And that's the ultimate horror, isn't it? Not the Demogorgon or the Mind Flayer or Vecna, but the idea that the person you trust most, the hero you've been rooting for, might actually be the one you should fear. That the girl with the kind eyes and the innocent face might be the most dangerous thing in Hawkins, might be the source of all the darkness, might be playing everyone for fools while they thank her for saving them. Think about what that would mean for Mike, for Joyce, for Hopper, for all the people who love 11. They've given her everything: their trust, their homes, their protection, their unconditional love. They've made themselves vulnerable to her in every possible way. And if she's been manipulating them all along, if she's been using them as pawns in some elaborate game, then that betrayal would be worse than any monster attack. Because monsters you can fight. But how do you fight someone you love, someone you trust completely, someone who's saved your life more times than you can count? You can't. That's the genius of it. If 11 is truly a villain, she's untouchable. She's positioned herself so perfectly that questioning her would seem insane. Fighting her would be impossible, and leaving her would mean abandoning the one person who can protect Hawkins from threats that, ironically, she might be creating. It's the perfect trap, the perfect con, the perfect villainy. And if it's real, if the Duffer Brothers really have been building to this revelation, then watching season 5 is going to be absolutely excruciating. Every time 11 uses her powers, every time she makes a sacrifice, every time she shows emotion or vulnerability, we'll be wondering, is this real? Is she genuine? Or is this just another layer of manipulation, another performance for an audience that doesn't realize they're being played? I've spent hours researching this theory, going through episodes, looking at fan discussions, examining every scene with 11 with fresh eyes. And the more I look, the more I see the cracks in the hero narrative, the moments where she seems just a little too cold, a little too calculating, the times when she holds back information or manipulates emotions or does things that don't quite make sense if she's really just trying to help. But I also see genuine moments of connection, of vulnerability, of love. Scenes where 11 seems authentically happy or sad or scared, where her reactions feel real rather than performed. And that's what makes this theory so difficult to evaluate, because 11 is complex enough that she could be either a hero or a villain, depending on which moments you emphasize, which patterns you trace, which interpretation feels most true. Maybe that's the point of her character. Maybe she's meant to be ambiguous, to exist in this space where we can never quite be sure of her motives or her nature. Maybe the show is asking us to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that heroes and villains aren't always easily distinguished, that the same person can be both depending on perspective and circumstance. Or maybe, just maybe, the show has been slowly revealing the truth all along, showing us piece by piece that 11 is the real threat, the real monster, the real villain of Stranger Things, and we've been too busy cheering for her to notice. Season 5 will tell us which interpretation is correct. Until then, we're left with questions, with theories, with the unsettling possibility that everything we thought we knew about this show was wrong. And honestly, that's exactly where the Duffer Brothers want us. Uncertain, unsettled, questioning everything, watching and rewatching, trying to figure out the truth before it's revealed. If this theory is wrong, if Eleven really is a straightforward hero, then I'll be the first to admit I was reading too much into things, seeing patterns that weren't really there. But if it's right, if Season 5 reveals that Eleven has been the villain all along, then Stranger Things will have pulled off one of the greatest narrative twists in television history. A 4-season con game where the audience never saw it coming because we were too busy loving the villain to realize what she really was. And that, my friends, is what makes theories like this so fascinating. The possibility that we've been wrong all along, that the story we thought we were watching was actually completely different, that the hero we've been rooting for might be the monster we should have feared. It challenges our assumptions, makes us question our judgments, forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew. Whether you believe this theory or not, whether you think Eleven is a hero or a villain or something in between, one thing is certain: she's one of the most complex, most fascinating, most brilliantly written characters in modern television. And the show has done an incredible job of making her both sympathetic and suspicious, both lovable and potentially terrifying. So as we wait for Season 5, as we count down the days until we finally get answers, I encourage you to watch Stranger Things again with this theory in mind. Look at Eleven's actions with fresh eyes. Notice the moments of coldness, the strategic decisions, the convenient timing of her failures and successes. Pay attention to how she manipulates emotions, how she positions herself at the center of every crisis, how she ensures that everyone depends on her completely. You might be surprised at what you see. You might find yourself questioning moments you once thought were heroic. You might start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, we've been fooled all along by one of television's greatest villains, hiding in plain sight behind the face of an innocent girl. Or you might watch again and be even more convinced that Eleven is a hero, that she's genuinely good despite her trauma and her powers, that she's trying her best in impossible circumstances. That's valid too. The beauty of Stranger Things is that it supports multiple interpretations, allows for complexity and nuance, doesn't give us easy answers. But whatever you conclude, whatever you believe about Eleven's true nature, I hope you'll agree that this theory adds another layer to an already rich and complex show. It makes rewatching more interesting, makes every scene potentially significant, makes us more active viewers rather than passive consumers of content. And isn't that what great television should do? Challenge us, make us think, make us question our assumptions? Whether Eleven is a hero or a villain, she's made us care deeply about her story. She's made us invested in her journey, and she's created one of the most compelling characters in the entire Stranger Things universe. So thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the darkest theories in the fandom. I hope it's given you something to think about, something to discuss with fellow fans, something to look for when you rewatch the series. And most of all, I hope it's enhanced your appreciation for just how brilliantly crafted this show is, how much thought and complexity the creators have poured into every element. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly as fascinated by this theory as I am. Do you think there's any truth to it? Do you see evidence for Eleven being a villain, or do you think she's definitively a hero? Are there moments in the show that support or contradict this theory? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, if you found it thought-provoking or entertaining, or just interestingly unsettling, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it lets me know that you want more content like this. Long-form analysis, deep dives into theories, explorations of the darker corners of our favorite shows. I have so many more Stranger Things theories I want to explore with you. We could dive deep into Will's connection to the Upside Down and whether he might be the true villain instead of Eleven. We could examine Vecna's real motives and whether he's actually working against the Mind Flayer rather than for it. We could analyze the Upside Down itself and all the questions about its true nature. There's so much left to explore, so many mysteries still unsolved. But for now, for tonight, this is where we'll leave things. With the unsettling possibility that Eleven, our beloved hero, might actually be the greatest villain in Stranger Things. That the girl we've been rooting for might be the monster we should fear. That everything we thought we knew might be wrong. Sleep well, my friends. And the next time you watch Stranger Things, pay close attention to Eleven. Look at her with fresh eyes, question her motives, wonder about her true nature. Because once you see the evidence for this theory, once you start noticing the patterns and the coincidences and the suspicious timing of events, you can't unsee it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that we've been watching a villain's origin story all along. We just didn't know it because she smiled at us and called us friend while she was burning the world down around us. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and never stop looking for the truth beneath the surface. Because in Hawkins, Indiana, nothing is ever quite what it seems. And the greatest evil might be wearing the face of an innocent girl with a shaved head and enormous eyes, asking if we want to be friends.